go to Google and type in climate change is, you're going to see different results depending on where you live and the particular things that Google knows about your interests.
That's not by accident. That's a design technique.
What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded.
A lot of people think Google's just a search box and Facebook's just a place to see what my friends are doing. What they don't realize is there's entire teams of engineers whose job is to use your psychology against you.
A little snippet from The Social Dilemma, latest documentary/drama on Netflix that takes a look at social media and how it's affecting all of us, how it's affecting you. Let's get a unique perspective on this. Ashkan Karbafrushian is founder of Watch Mojo. Basically, if you look at Montreal companies, you got millions and millions of subscribers on YouTube. Is there anyone more successful in this city on YouTube, Ash?
I'm sure there are, and that's the beauty of YouTube. It's a whole universe for everyone, depending on what they're interested in. But we've had some success, obviously, and I think it's a testament to the awesome team we have.
Yeah, you have had a lot of success. I do appreciate you being humble, though, but you guys are really kicking some butt on YouTube. So I'd love your perspective on this, because in this documentary, yes, it takes aim at Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat, but YouTube is also on that list of companies that use these methods to get eyeballs. So I would love to know your take. You've seen the Social Dilemma. Watch Mojo has even published a top 10 critiques of the documentary. So why don't you tell me your thoughts?
Sure. So when I started my career 20 years ago, I worked in the search engine industry, which is all about intent. You're typing something in, which is you're telegraphing what you're going to buy, what you're looking for, and so on. At the same time I started my career, there was another company called Zero Knowledge, which was also a darling here when journalists would talk about the internet. And Zero Knowledge, ironically, was all about your actual behavior, and it was all the premise of like users want anonymity when they're surfing. Obviously, that was not really the case. We hashtag everywhere we are. We put a picture of the coffee we're drinking, exactly where we're going. We check in when we go for supposed confidential meetings. So I ultimately think that, for sure, companies throughout history, when left unchecked, tend to do bad things because we're always drawn between good and evil, fear and greed. And so you need some checks and balances there. But clearly, politicians don't have the answers. They don't even know which arena to show up to. But I ultimately think it's up to the individuals. We are responsible for what we eat, for what we drink, for what we smoke or don't smoke. And it's the same thing with mobile devices, the internet, and computers. But it's very easy to look for boogeymen.
So, Ash, that's where I guess we are going to start to break apart on opinions here, because if you leave it up to individuals, the deck is stacked against them. And I just think of myself. I remember one week during the lockdown, stuck at home, nothing to do. I end up on YouTube, and I did a search for David Letterman, and then you find that there's a whole trove of like 1980s Late Night with David Letterman episodes that are on there. And YouTube is so good at delivering up the next video and the next video that I literally spent a few nights doing that. And I could think about myself, let's say instead of searching for David Letterman, I searched for something that went along the lines of conspiracy. By the end of that week, I would have been convinced of it. And I don't think you can say, well, it's up to the individual here, because they don't have the tools, Ash. Like, individuals don't have the tools to fight off a relentless bombardment of here's what the world is, here's what the world is, here's what you should think. We're just not equipped for it. And I think that's one of the convincing arguments that the Social Dilemma makes.
Fair enough. I think it's always about balance. I'm not pushing for any extreme scenario. I don't think unbridled capitalism, laissez-faire, works for all, nor do I think you want government intervention when they don't even know what the stakes are. So I definitely don't want to leave you with the impression that I'm an extremist. I just think that the reality is I don't think most people care about this stuff. I think many people actually want that customization, that kind of like, serve me what's next, I think there's very few who are maybe the vocal minority. And look, you're doing your job. You do a great job, and I think you want to highlight these things. But I don't think most people care about this stuff, is ultimately the point I'm making. I think journalists need to highlight all these things, but the average Joe probably wants to go down that rabbit's hole. And I think the point about just individual responsibility is I contributed to the video you referred to, the top 10 maddening things about social media. I think it's more about make sure that you look at a few different points of views, you research, and then make a decision for yourself. That's what I mean, that the onus has to be on the individual, because give me the solution. Are you suggesting that politicians come up with remedies? They won't. They're biased. They're ignorant of the whole, 360-degree view. So left with no real practical solution, I think it's really up to the users and the individuals. And frankly, most people don't care.
Well, I can understand why from your perspective, Ash. So we're with Ashkan Karbafarushan, founder of WatchMojo. And WatchMojo, a lot of your bread and butter is top 10 lists on YouTube, top 10 videos, right? And if you watch one of these videos, right, you'll want to watch more, right? And if YouTube continues to serve it up, well, that's good for your company, right? The more views, the more hours watched, that's very good for you. And Ash, at least in the situation of WatchMojo, at least what you're doing is, valid entertainment, right? And it's hard to make the case people end up spending their day watching top 10 videos from WatchMojo. They're going to become radicalized. No, they'll be entertained, let's say, or maybe they'll end up liking K-pop a little bit more. But the problem is there's too many people using the same tools you're using for nefarious reasons, right? And Ash, you can't deny that the world is more divided than ever, right? You look south of the border, what's happening between right and left. I mean, I don't know how you can look at the causes and not end up pointing the finger at social media.
So we agree. I co-wrote the piece, and number one entry, I'll give it away, is it'll get worse before it gets better, and I say you hear of actual violence in far-off places like Myanmar, but it's even in America. Look at what's happening now. I mean, I grew up in Iran very briefly before moving to Canada at the age of 5, and it's like what's happening in the U.S. is not that crazy from what's happened elsewhere. So we agree. I earlier on talked about, good and evil, fear and greed. We don't give in to these tools, and we hold ourselves back. We are not like, let's just chase every click, clickbait. We don't go for maximum views, because we understand that if you test these systems, you can do a lot of bad, which is, again, a point I make here, which is for the last 20 years, you've had investors, venture capitalists who have basically rewarded bad behavior. Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook as a tool to rape women. But all I'm saying is this is nothing new, right? We could blame Facebook for social unrest, but Rupert Murdoch's Fox was a key voice in pushing for the Iraq War. William Randolph Hearst 100 years ago used his newspapers to push America into the Spanish-American War. So all I'm saying is if we are going to criticize and point fingers, let's just educate ourselves. Let's look at the full discussions, because blaming big tech alone is not the answer, right? And look, I'm biased because we benefit from big tech in certain ways. But I assure you, when I'm having conversations with Google execs, they don't think I'm their cheerleader. I'm basically, putting them, holding their feet to the fire and whatnot. So it goes back to the individual in every sense, meaning I myself as an entrepreneur, as a business person, I can't, it's like back in the day, the tobacco industry execs, they would do bad things, and then eventually they got penalized. But the same way that you can and you should hold like tobacco companies, you still have to understand it's up to the individual smoker to stop smoking, so to speak. It's the same analogy I'm getting here.
Ash, and I'll take that. That point is very valid. Human nature is human nature. We've seen these in the past before social media. I guess the argument is that social media is enabling such a rapidity for these things to move so fast, and it's hard for whether it's governments or people to adapt to that. Ash, we could talk about this all day, but unfortunately we're out of time.
Thank you, sir.
Ashkan Karbafarushan, founder of WatchMojo, and go check out the WatchMojo family of channels on YouTube, where they do some awesome work.